Hey, boys and girls, it's Ollie and Mandy here for another episode in the health space. I want to really look at, a big part of these podcasts where Mandy and I dive into a lot of the behavioral components of sticking to a plan and how do we really create something healthy that lasts long term. Always starts and kind of ends with those 4 inches between your ears, right? Getting to that space where you're understanding how you're thinking about something can drastically change the entire outcome of what you're doing. And being able to address, for example, if you've got the perfect meal in front of you, but you're rushed and stressed when eating it, it changes your digestion. You can improve your night routine, but if you start stressing about what's happening the night before, you're probably going to wake up early and disrupt your total quality of sleep, right? If you're doing the right exercises, but you're busy listening to a podcast or not focusing on the muscle, you're not going to get the most out of the exercise. So it's less about doing the stuff and more about how you're thinking about the stuff or what problems kind of arise from that lack of continual exploration or experimentation. And I think a big one that I want to go through today has been this overall discussion around backing yourself to make something truly work, right? If you've done program after program and you haven't seen the results you're after, or maybe you're doing something kind of tentatively to see if it works and you're reinforcing that it doesn't, you might be part of the problem. And I want to make sure that we can break this down for you and give you a bit of a thought process that we use to kind of quickly identify the clients that are going to win regardless of what they do and the ones that are going to continue to get in their own way, find roadblocks to get stuck on rather than to be able to move forward. And I think today's going to be a collection of steps that you can take in regards to a self inventory, if you like, of trying to find which one might be holding you back slightly. So before we dive in, the first part I want to kind of address is this definition of commitment, right? And I think it's going to set up today quite nicely, which is, in my view, commitment is the removal of alternatives, meaning that you are committed to one thing and you are removing alternatives, right? When you get married, you are removing alternatives. You are with one woman or one man for a period of time. Being able to, or hopefully forever, and with weight training, or at least with a program, we've seen this where someone's trying to work with a nutritionist and a naturopath and a coach on the side, and then they try to join our program, and we say no. I'd like you to focus on one thing, and if that's not our thing, that's totally fine. But if you want to work with us, we do need to make sure that you're actually focused on what we say, rather than tweaking and adjusting it through three other sort of opinions, which turns into something completely new, right? So commitment is a huge part of this, of actually just simplifying what you're focusing on. And I think a big part of this can be the how you approach a problem has lots of different ways of tackling it, right? And multiple of those could work, and they may work over different timelines. We've just seen the ones that work in our world and the ones that are being reinforced through doing it time and time again. Therefore, those are the ones we use. And the amount of times, Mandy, that we've gone down a rabbit hole of being like, actually, I think we could do this better. Let's do this instead. Awesome. Change, right? So I'm sure there's things that we're emotionally attached to, but we try to really look at it and battle test them as much as we can. But we are human, and there's probably things we don't question. But in most cases, we've got enough numbers of clients and processes in place to really check, like, are our thoughts true? Like, are they helping our clients the best? So from that sort of blanket rule thinking, or the sort of key disruptions that get in the way of clients, right? You've just done a sort of mid-month program review for clients in a particular phase of the program. What do you think the big difference is on your side, Mandy, between the ones that are just humming along, going great and moving forward, versus the ones that are finding a way to get stuck or feel that it's getting hard?
Mm. I've actually got a lot of thoughts here. I think that when we're looking for um, gates, so to speak, we'll find a way to escape from the thing we're trying to do, right? And it's kind of like there's leaks. If you look for the leaks, you'll find them. And I think the people that just kind of lean in and are like fully committed to the process, mentally they get in a better space too, because they're not fatigued by all of the other options that could be there, because they're just committed to this one thing. And they can kind of take action on it and just run with it. Where I do find that if people, it's always a little bit of a red flag for me, right? When this, and it's not a red flag in the sense that it's a problem, but I like to recognize it when someone's first joining the program and they're looking for all the outs, like, but can I have some of this? And can I have some of that? And can I do this instead? And it's really important to kind of address that up front and be like, all of those things you can do, because we're not kind of here to give arbitrary rules, But if you want to get the best out of what we know works, then just do this for now. And then we can have that conversation later on. But if you come into something looking for ways out, like imagine getting married and then just looking for all the ways that you could kind of edge back out of that relationship. Like it's not going to last very long. And if you do the same thing in a health program, you're just going to end up getting confused and frustrated because you won't really get the results that you're after. And I think the other part of it is I was actually responding to some check-ins with clients that are about sort of the 6-week mark into the program. And it was a really interesting response actually that I did have from one lady who's saying, she's trying to get into the strength training and it's brand new to her and she was just struggling a little bit, a bit of a mental barrier to actually getting into it. And she was finding excuses not to do it. But in writing that down, she recognized that it was a mental block that she could push through and that she just needed to ask for help for it. And it was really cool as well because it was like almost like she wanted to do it. Her brain was saying no because it's feeling a little bit hard. But then when she recognized that, oh, it's just my brain telling me this, I can actually ask for help and find a way through. I was like, this is awesome. This is exactly what we're here for, to help you, one, develop awareness to those things that are holding you back, but two, then find a way through them.
Yeah. And I think the marriage example is actually a really good one because I saw a pretty big shift in how I had an argument with my dear wife, Maya, when we were sort of initially dating. That sounds like a weird word now. Where, you'd have a certain argument and you'd kind of find a way to be right instead of find a solution, right? Whereas I remember distinctly like having like my first decent argument after we were married and I was like, oh, I better solve this one, like really work together to fix it rather than, find a way to get right. And obviously, hopefully I did a lot of that before getting married as well. But it was like, I actually remember noticing a difference in that like true, like removal of alternatives, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's a best example I've got in regards to people doing a program and then kind of looking for ways to fail. And one of my first mentors actually sent me a book I think it's called Psycho-Cybernetics or something along those lines. And the whole book is around this idea of ultimately what you focus on is more likely to happen, right? So if you focus on things that are doomed to fail and I didn't think this was going to work and it proved me right, you may feel right in the moment, but you still lost because you didn't move forward, right? So you get to kind of have this decision of like, do you want to be right or do you want to win? And I think if you're in that space of, I want to see how this program goes, but it probably won't work. I'm like, do you want to be right or do you want to win, right? Because if you've spent a bit of money on something or you've invested your time, energy, some form of resource into something, there's an inkling there that you want it to work. But then if you kind of mask and sort of make that water murky in regards to saying, well, I kind of want it, but I kind of think this won't work. And then it's their problem and I can stay in the same spot. That's a really, really toxic place to be. And unfortunately, when you have that worldview of saying, seeking for ways to make me feel right, you will absolutely find it. And we have, I'll be the first one to say not every single person in our program has these amazing results that we post online because we are working with humans and humans don't approach things all the same way, right? We put everything possible into having the best coaches, the best systems, the best process, the simplest way to make it integrate in with family and lifestyle and travel and everything we do. But if you've come in with a mindset of I'm actively going to find ways to fail, well, you're going to find them, right? And I think being able to accept that, for you and I, we love seeing people win. It literally is the oxygen we breathe. And when we personally have to really be mindful of our total time spent on negative people or problem solving, because it would absolutely ruin our mental and physical health to a degree as well, right? Luckily, we have far in excess the people that are winning and really getting results out of the program, but it's as you said, it's a red flag. It's at least a little red light to be like, hey, check in on this person, because it's not the steps they are taking that will be the problem. It's the lens to which they are looking through the problem at or with. If that makes sense. So,
and I think it gives us a nice way to look at it though, right? Because it's like the steps to give the person who's looking for all the outs is not always the next thing to do. Well, obviously they need to do that, but it's actually more in that mindset piece of of their own belief in the fact that this can work and not looking for outs. And there's more of a kind of mindset discussion that needs to be had there. So it's actually useful information for us too, to be able to help that person move into a space where they can fully commit and then go on. And we've seen that happen multiple times, eh?
Yeah, I was going to say, you and I have both seen many, many clients where we've just asked the simple question, would you like this to work?
Mm,
After they've told me all the reasons it won't.
mm,
And it's just a really nice question to be like, are you here to tell me what's wrong, or are you here to find a solution to kind of move forward, right? And it's a really
mm,
nice way to look at kind of life in general. It's a fairly meta question, but like um, even looking through the mental health lens, which we've talked about before, why is my life not meaningful? You'll find ways to answer that question. First, like how whatever the alternative is, that I'm having a mental blank, but uh, that sort of nobody loves me type thing, you'll get an
mm,
answer to like reinforcing that. Or, there's a couple of really important people in my life that is so much more important than everyone liking me, for example. There's so many ways of reframing the same thing
mm,
that I think it's really important. So let's dig into this sort of blanket rule thinking for a little bit, because examples in the health space, a really basic one that we kind of mentioned before is someone injured their back doing a hip thrust, right? And they say, well, hip thrusts are bad. I'm never doing those again. They're not made for me, right? We then look at their form, take them through the movement, and they're going way too low. They're arching their back. They're using a couch as a bench, whatever else might be coming through. And then we, lo and behold, find the problem is not said hip thrust, it's the way you are doing it.
mm,
So being able to address that blanket rule thinking of like, high fat doesn't work for me because I did keto, or hip thrusts are not for me because I did X, Y, and Z. Being able to sort of identify, have you kind of learnt the wrong lesson, is something
mm,
that's really common. And two examples I'll bring up is, if your first relationship didn't go well and you were like, oh, well, that ended badly, women aren't for me or men aren't for me. Well, that's probably not been the case. You've probably found that the person you've married or you're with now is probably not the first person you in most cases, have
mm,
been with, but being able to kind of learn that lesson of being like, well, that's one of many people. There's probably other people out there that will behave differently. So what lesson will we learn? I had a girlfriend in high school. Her mum had a car crash, and she just said, cars are too dangerous. I'm never driving again. Right? And that's all personal preference, whatever. But it certainly got in the way a ton, because she said, like, I'm never going to get a car. I'm always going to take the bus now, because this car crash. Uh, and from that, you sort of have some pretty massive changes in how you approach day to day structure. In a lot of ways, that's actually kind of the more accurate version of trauma, right? Which is one action changed your behavior
mm,
moving forward, right?
mm.
Why did I go down that tangent? Not sure. The blanket rule thinking of, have I learnt the right lesson? Because in a lot of cases, we have had these sort of unquestioned beliefs with a lot of things that have got in the way of them finding the right answer, right? And
Mm.
it's being something along the lines of, well, I've done this before, therefore it doesn't work, and I don't want to explore any of that ever again. And it
Yeah.
might be that you went for a run once, hurt your knee, so exercise is not for you. Well, that's clearly the wrong lesson. But in the moment, like from the outside, that looks logical to say, well, that's dumb. But when you're in the moment, those things can really be reinforced. And it's I guess, a really good example of how often, if you're looking for the answer, your brain will find a way to reinforce it.
I had a really good conversation with a lady yesterday who, wanting to lose some weight, has tried everything there is. She's done keto and she lost weight. She's done bodybuilding in the past and lost, weight and obviously built some muscle. She's done macro tracking and like something like 360 minutes a week, which is what, 4 hours of cardio on top of her strength training, and she lost weight. But none of it stuck. And so her takeaway was, I've tried all these things, but nothing sticks. And I was like, the lesson in that is not that any of those were necessarily wrong. It's that they were extreme versions of those things, and there was probably something, a gold nugget within all of those. So instead of kind of being like, well, all of these things haven't worked, it's like actually there's little pieces within all of that that could work. And if we take the good pieces from that and combine it into something that actually works for you in the long term, then you've got this really good answer. And it's kind of the same thing, but the opposite way of, right, I did this, it didn't work, so I'm never to try it again. Rather, she's tried lots of different things, take the goodness from all of those things and make it into one good thing that really sticks.
Yeah, yeah, and it's a nice way to say, most people will say there's no failure, there's just winning and learning, but there's absolutely failure if you don't learn. And I
Yeah.
think when you go down that rabbit hole of self-experimentation and you're able to find out, oh, that worked, that didn't, it's only actually valuable data if you take it on board. And if you, as you said, it's probably one of my common phrases on our recent bloodwork calls of, based on all the things you've done in the past, I think we can take a little bit of each of them to really find your personal plan, right? Like a little bit of this over here that clearly worked, and a little bit over that. That was a bit drastic, but we got the idea, right? And you can start to create that plan in front of them that isn't the generic, you know, way over here on the left or right, or which sounds political, but more like drastic measures of what that might be, right? Like I've many times joked that um, I'm carnivore with a side of vegetarian, right? Or whatever it might be. Like it's a combination of these what would otherwise look at drastic alternatives to really find what would probably be a better answer for you.
Mm.
And I think you've led to a certain point there, which I want to kind of use a very drastic example. It isn't one I'm going to recommend, but most of you could lose weight. Actually, all of you at the extreme could lose weight on a bread diet, right? All the gluten, all the stuff, right?
Yeah.
But it won't work if you try also do the keto plan and you try do the carnivore plan, you do X, Y, and Z. Like you just commit and focus on one thing, right? Now, as I said, don't recommend it, but being able to really highlight that you need to be able to focus on one thing for a period of time, right? Because if you're trying to do the 4 hours of cardio and then you're trying to drop your food intake and you're trying to do X, Y, and Z, your body's going to be in this just massive stress state of like, what the hell am I focusing on right now, right? If you, a classic example, if you try to do the bread diet plus trying to train 6 days a week, that would be worse, like literally worse than just doing the bread diet by itself.
Yeah.
So being able to look at these combinations of things that you think you're being clever and you think that you're trying to increase the likelihood that something's going to happen, you're actually decreasing the likelihood because you're getting so noisy with so many different things. And I
Mm.
think, ironically, obviously, Body Reset is built in a way that we're looking at physical, digestive, and what am I missing? Psychological together. But it's through the lens of knowing how they complement each other. So, for
Mm.
example, if we're going sort of a lower carbohydrates, higher fat, I'm not going to throw a bunch of HIIT training and long cardio at you because it's simply not going to work. Whereas if we're kind of going the other way and we're able to kind of fuel the body in a different way, add a bit more carbohydrates, we've got a little bit more calories on board, adding in a more sort of dense workout with shorter rest times, more of that cardio, if that's what you're after, is going to work way better because there's absolutely going to be a correlation of those inputs and outputs.
Mm.
But that has to be so complementary. In most cases, just slap it all together and see what happens. So I think the big thing here is the phrase is either option would work, but not both. And I think if you're
Mm.
trying to work with five coaches that aren't talking to each other, that's going to be really hard. And if you're trying to take advice from five different people on Instagram that are clearly conflicting in their advice, you're also going to feel like you're worse off because you are, right? So I think it's worth bringing up too.
I think it's a little bit of it sounds like a contradiction of terms, but it isn't. Is that if you, for example, you want to lose weight or something and you're like, I'm going to do carnivore, and you do carnivore for say 2 weeks till you get sick of not ever being able to eat a piece of broccoli, and then you're like full swing the other way, I'm going to do something else because I read something and now I'm going to do this. 3 months down the track from doing that, you're probably not going to be any better off. However, if you took some of the components of all of those things and implemented them for those 3 months, you might have actually truly succeeded. So, and which is kind of what Body Reset does, right? We're looking at all of those different layers. So we are taking components of all sorts of different things and building them into one program that works. What we're not doing is program hopping from this to that to the other thing, and missing the actual points. I think supplements fall into this category too, right? Where people are like, they're all on this one supplement down there and it must be this brand and all that, when actually there's probably a few different supplements from a few different brands that can be a good combination. Just because this is the brand that's been marketed to you doesn't mean it's a good thing. So it's kind of like finding the goodness within all of the different theories out there, working it into your own life, and then actually sticking with that, and right back to that point of commitment. Remove all other options and just do that, and it's going to be a whole lot better off.
Yeah, look, we'll move on from this point, but the doing 3 months of carnivore and then doing 3 months of vegetarian doesn't equal a balanced diet in the middle, right? It means two extremes and two lots of stresses.
Yeah,
So finding something in between the two is probably a better alternative. The last point I want to bring up is this awareness of the ownership of success, and I've taken this from a mentor of mine that I respect a lot, and he's done some really big things, and his theme or focus around all the programs he's done good ones, he's done bad ones, and if you've invested in multiple coaches before or multiple business plans or whatever the thing might be, you'll have certain coaches that really stood out to be like, that was an amazing program, like they just put it together so well, like Body Reset. Or you had other programs where you're like, wow, this was just kind of slapped together. I kind of had to figure it out on my own, and I certainly wouldn't recommend it to anyone else, right? When that happens, you can either say, well, that program didn't work for me because of them. Now, the reframe from this particular mentor was, it's not about them, it's about me. It's about what I can extract from that program, even if it's what not to do, right? And it's just such a great frame because it keeps you in the driver's seat, right? If you go into a program and you say, well, it didn't work for me, so I've just wasted this 4 months because of you, what you've done is you've protected your ego and said, I feel good now. But what you've also done is completely got in the way of you owning the actions that you could have taken in order for that to move forward. So that ownership of success is something I think about so often, and every time I do a new program. And I actually did one about 6 months ago that wasn't great, and it was a lot of work. Like I'm probably about 26 hours of content in, right? And that was required. And I think being able to say, well, that was a lot of time invested, and they could have absolutely made that half the amount of time by simply just redoing it and consolidating it. But at the same time, there are things that I've taken out of that I'm going to just make sure I use as much as possible because there is something I've invested in here to highlight I want to improve. Therefore, I'm going to improve that thing, right? And I think and it definitely came up for me in that program, a nice way to be like, oh, this is one of those programs, right? I'm finding it kind of irritating as to what I'm trying to do. But at the same time, it's not about them, it's about me, right? I've invested this money, I put my hand up to say this needs to improve. So where's this going, all right? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I had a similar situation last year where I paid for some training that I thought was going to be a certain thing. When I actually got into it, it wasn't quite what I thought. And this can happen in any area of life, right? The decision there is, are you going to get bitter about it?
Yeah.
And blame everyone and be the victim? Or are you going to be like, what can I learn from this? What could I do differently? Where's my responsibility within this to utilize what I've been given or what I have available to me? And I think in the context of a health program, it's really easy because we get jaded with health stuff. If you've tried a lot of programs or weight loss things or various things in the past, you already come into every new thing with a cynical attitude of it might not work because I know 10 times before now it hasn't worked. But the ownership is still on you to be like, how can I get the best out of this? How can I commit and do this and find what's in there and then find what learning is in there, right? Because even in those like the one that I did, so much in there. It wasn't what I thought I'd get, but there was heaps in there for me to learn and refine and ask better questions and know more what I want to get out of something before I put the investment in. Like all of those, there's so much self-awareness that came from that.
Yeah. Yeah. It sort of reminds me of the locked in on the goal, flexible on the approach kind of discussion, right? You're just, what can I extract out of this? It's not about you, it's about me. And it's a really nice way to just reframe ownership, which I've thought about a ton. So we're going to leave that there. Mandy, you've got to get ready for another video. Busy day today. But hopefully that's been really helpful. Again, I'd love to hear from you if this is something that's really landed. That awareness of that commitment. I always think about this. Commitment is a removal of alternatives. Are you trying to do three things all at once? Are you doing one program but still thinking about the one you're going to do afterwards? That's going to guarantee the first one you don't extract as much out of it as you could. The second part is that blanket rule thinking. Just be aware of, are you learning the wrong lesson or kind of overlooking a whole area of value because one part of that didn't work or one girlfriend didn't work out or one exercise injured you, right? That's going to be really important. Or lastly, that ownership of success. Even if something is lazily put together or not as good as you thought it could be, what can you do on your side to make it better? Not because of them, but because of you. Those, for me, I think about that all the time. And I think if every single person approached the next program they did with that mindset, they'd get double out of the program quite easily for what they went in with. So I hope that's been helpful. I hope you have an amazing rest of your week, and we'll see you on the next one.